Hello, I'm James Lee. I'm with the Identity Theft Resource Center, and today we're kicking off the Tax Identity Theft Awareness Week with our partner, the Federal Trade Commission. Joining me today is Lisa Schifferle. She is an attorney with the Federal Trade Commission, and we're going to be talking about identity theft and scam trends, but specifically about identity theft involving taxes. So how does tax identity theft happen? How can you reduce your chance of being a victim of tax identity theft? And what do you do if it actually happens to you? We'll also talk about the resources available to you. So to start, Lisa, why don't you tell us about general trends around identity theft in the United States?
Thanks, James. Before we get into focusing on tax ID theft, like you said, I'm going to start by talking about some trends relating to identity theft and scams. So how big a problem is identity theft? According to the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Statistics, 26 million people were victims of identity theft in 2016. That's the same as 1 out of every 10 people over the age of 16. And the losses were huge, $17.5 billion in 2016 lost to identity theft. So you might be wondering, why are we looking at this Bureau of Justice Statistics study that's from 2016, and the reason is it is the most recent scientific study or survey on identity theft. But for some more recent statistics, on the next slide, you'll see some 2019 data from the Federal Trade Commission. This is our Consumer Sentinel data, and if you're not familiar with Consumer Sentinel, basically it's a database of complaints that we get filed both with the FTC and then also with other agencies like Better Business Bureau, state attorney generals, federal, state, and local law enforcement. And so we put this all together and then look at the trends. And what the trends show for 2019 is that identity theft is back to being the #1 complaint category. It was #1 for over a decade, and then it fell behind imposter scams the past few years. But it's back up to #1 with imposters a very close second, only about 3,000 complaints behind. In terms of actual numbers, in 2019, we received over 650,000 complaints about identity theft, which is up 20% from 2018. On the next slide, we have some interesting trends on fraud and age, and you'll see here that younger people reported losing money to fraud more often than older people. That's sometimes the opposite of what people are expecting, but we do see that younger people actually report losing money to fraud more often. But interestingly, when older people do report losing money, the losses they report are higher. So it's about $1,600 for those 80 plus as the median loss, as opposed to only $460 for people in their 20s. Now on the next slide, you'll see some other interesting trends about imposters and identity theft. You'll see here that imposter scams, when people got an imposter scam, only 1 in 10 people lost money to these scams in 2019. And that's an improvement from 2018, where 1 in 5 lost money to imposter scams. So hopefully that means that the education that we're doing about imposter scams is helping people recognize these scams before they lose money. Now, focusing on identity theft, which is what we're talking about today, overall identity theft complaints were up 20%. And if you're wondering what this is all about, you'll see here that credit card related or new account fraud is up 88%, whereas tax ID theft, which we're going to focus on for most of this presentation, is down 29%. But it's still very important to talk about tax identity theft because the consequences to it can be pretty significant for someone who experiences it. So before we do get into tax identity theft, we just want to talk on the next slide about some other examples of how your identity might be misused. It can be, like I mentioned, for opening credit cards, utility accounts, the tax refund that we're going to get into in some detail, for loans, or sometimes people apply for employment or even get medical care using your personal information. And the impact can be quite devastating to people. It's more than just having to change your credit card sometimes. It can mean being denied a home loan, being denied a job, being denied medical care. It can mean harassment or legal issues. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of stress and anxiety. So I'm going to turn it over to James to talk a little more about the non-economic impacts of identity theft.
Thank you, Lisa. Each year the ITRC researches what happens to ID crime victims beyond the known financial implications like we were just talking about. Those implications include emotional, the physical, and the psychological impacts experienced by the victims of an identity crime. We published these findings from interviews with people who were victims of the crime during the last 12 months or so. And we are now compiling the information that we'll release later this year. But there are some very telling findings in the 2019 report. So if you look on the screen, you'll see the three categories here. These are very real impacts, and impacts more than just the person directly involved. It also involves their immediate family, their extended family, their friends, and it even can extend into the workplace with impacting coworkers and work itself. And that happens whenever somebody's ID is stolen or when it's misused. So let's talk specifically now about tax ID theft. So Lisa, why don't you take us through that?
Sure, great. So on the next slide, you'll see a visual about identity theft. And basically what it's saying is that your identity is valuable regardless of your perceived status. So when it comes to identity theft and tax identity theft in particular, it can really affect anyone regardless of income, race, gender, socioeconomic status, because thieves will steal identities regardless of whether you have high or low income or good or bad credit. So it's a problem that really can affect anyone. And when we talk about tax identity theft, on the next slide, you'll see a few different examples. The main one that we're talking about when we talk about tax identity theft is what is sometimes called a stolen identity refund fraud, which is when someone takes your social security number and they use it to apply for a tax refund so that they get a refund. And when you try to go get your refund, it's held up as a duplicate return. And there also are some other types of tax identity theft that are less prevalent, but we do want to point them out as well. So they're listed here on that slide. One of them is when somebody works using your social security number, and so they earn wages, and if they don't pay taxes on those wages, then you may get a letter from the IRS saying you earn these wages and didn't pay taxes, so you have taxes past due. And really that was just due to the identity thief using your identity. The next type is claiming someone's children as dependents. Sometimes somebody will claim your child as a dependent in order to get that child tax credit or other benefits on their tax return. And finally, there are even people who will use a deceased person's information in order to claim a tax refund. So those are various different types of tax identity theft, but as I said, to start, the main one that people usually are talking about when they talk about tax ID theft is that one when people use your information to get a refund. Now on the next slide, you can see a visual of the trends in terms of tax identity theft in relation to other types of identity theft. The red line there is tax identity theft. So you can see how it was a huge, huge problem about 5 years ago. But over the course of the past few years, it has gone down significantly. The orange line, on the other hand, is the credit card related identity theft. So you can see how that has really risen, especially within the past year. And then the green line is the loan or lease related identity theft, which has also risen, especially in the last year. Again, this is based on reports of identity theft in Consumer Sentinel. So some trends that we see on the next slide are what we said, that the credit card related ID theft is up 88%, tax ID theft down 29%, but overall identity theft up. It's also important to realize that there have been significant increases in some related complaint categories, such as Social Security imposter scams and business email imposter scams. And we'll be talking more about Social Security imposter scams along with IRS imposter scams on part 2 of this webinar, which will be on Thursday, February 6th. So we hope you'll join us for that as well. In the meantime, I'll turn it back to James to talk a little more about how does tax identity theft happen.
Thank you, Lisa. So yeah, let's turn to now how you might actually find yourself to be the victim of tax identity theft. And it can happen in a variety of ways. You'll see there on the screen the most common ways. And these are the sort of the low-tech ways that they can happen. And it all begins basically with someone having your Social Security number. And in these low-tech ways, they can happen a variety of things. You can lose your wallet. You can lose your purse. And if you're carrying your Social Security number or you're carrying some document that has a Social Security number on it, that's how it can get loose and out into the wild. Smartphones. Most everybody has a smartphone today, and people carry their smartphones with them all the time, and they're chock full of information that a data thief would love to have to be able to misuse your information and your identity. So one of the key things here is don't carry things in your wallet that have your Social Security number on it. Don't carry it in your purse. If you have a smartphone, make sure you only put the bare minimum of information on there that you need and lock that phone. Make sure you've got a password on it, or if it has a fingerprint reader, make sure you have the fingerprint reader activated, or facial recognition, so you can keep that information away from the thieves who want to steal your data. ID theft is a crime of opportunity, which means that it may be someone you know who steals your information. So you need to make sure that even in your own home, your very important personal and sensitive information is kept secure. So keep it in a place where you know it is and that you can control access to it. Dumpster diving is alive and well. It still happens, and it is still a source of identity crimes. People throw out information. They throw out mail at the workplace. They throw out information that has identifiers, including Social Security numbers on it sometimes. And people will go and steal that right out of the dumpster. You know what they'll also steal are your W-2 and your 1099 forms right out of your mailbox. So use a secure mailbox whenever possible, and be aware when those documents are going to be arriving so you can be on the lookout for them. So if they don't show up, you can immediately contact your employer or whoever would issue that 1099 tax form, because the bad guys want that information to execute these kind of identity theft tax schemes. And also, there is the concept of phony tax preparation services. So when you're looking for somebody to help you with filing your taxes, make sure that you're dealing with a reputable company and a reputable provider, because there are people who will pretend to be, and all they're really doing is trying to collect more and more personal information. They'll ask for your Social Security number. They'll ask for other kinds of information that can lead to identity theft. So if you come across somebody like that, make sure that you inform the IRS, and we'll tell you about how to do that in a few minutes. So how does tax identity theft happen online? Well, identity criminals get the information they need from you in a variety of ways. They are very smart people, and they are very diligent and are always coming up with new ways to try to separate you from your data and ultimately you from your money. So one way is we've seen all the news headlines. You've probably received letters at home around data breaches. Well, that is a significant source of the information people need to either execute an tax identity theft or to start the process. They'll have just enough information. They have your phone number, so now they're going to call you. Or they're going to create realistic emails and websites and texts. We've heard the term phishing, right? Phishing with a PH. Well, phishing is more than just emails these days. It's fake websites. It's fake social media sites. It's fake texts, all trying to get you to reply in a way that provides that sensitive information they need to be able to steal your identity for tax purposes. Be very wary of open Wi-Fi connections because they may not be legitimate. When you're sitting at the airport or your neighborhood coffee shop, you'll see that little notice pop up on your smartphone or your laptop, and it says that the Wi-Fi connection is available. Make sure you know that that is a legitimate Wi-Fi connection, because that's another way that the bad guys will use to steal your information right from your device. Software for your laptop, your desktop computer, mobile apps, file sharing sites, all those things can now be used to collect personal information. And sometimes they get shipped right off to scammers. All of that then can be used to execute a tax ID theft scheme. So Lisa, why don't you walk us through how some of those work?
Sure. I'm going to talk about some of the warning signs of tax ID theft, but first I just want to emphasize a few of the points that James meant in terms of how to prevent identity theft that are really important, so are worth repeating, and that is to know your tax preparer, because like he said, there are phony people out there setting up tax preparation services just to take your personal information. Also, file early so you beat the identity thieves to the punch. And if you file online, use a secure connection. So don't file your taxes using public Wi-Fi. And if you file by paper, go to the post office and take it directly to the post office so that no one can steal it from your mailbox. So those are some of the prevention tips. And then the warning signs of tax identity theft. First of all, if your social security number has ever been lost, stolen, or compromised, then you are at greater risk of tax identity theft, because that social security number is the main thing they need to perpetrate tax ID theft. And you'll probably find out about tax ID theft. It may be because of an unusual delay in getting a refund, but usually it will be through an IRS notification. And the IRS has gotten a lot better at spotting tax identity theft, so good that you may even find out before it impacts you. But you may also get a notification saying that there was a duplicate tax filing because the thief filed first for a refund, and then when your filing went in, it's a duplicate, two people using the same social security number. Or you may get a notification for unreported income if it's like we were talking about before, where someone misused your social security number to get a job and didn't pay taxes on that. Or you may get the notice from the IRS about duplicate dependents if someone misused your dependents on their form. So most likely you're going to hear about it through an IRS notification. But James has some real-life stories of tax ID theft to share with you to give you a fuller picture of how this might happen.
Yeah, we're going to talk very quickly about 4 examples. These are real-life examples, but they're also very common. So if you see the warning signs in these stories, if you see those in your life, that's one of your tips that you need to be very careful, and you may need to notify the IRS of a possible scam. So let's talk about Frank. He and his daughter and his wife were informed by their accountant that the accountant's computer had been hacked. So they had a data breach, and the accountant's giving them a year of free monitoring. However, the daughter's tax return was rejected because somebody else had already filed. So there's your tip. When you file your income tax and you find out, wait a minute, somebody's already filed for you, that's an indication that your identity has been stolen for the purposes of tax fraud. There's Carolyn. She received a letter from the IRS that someone filed a tax report for earnings for her 17-year-old daughter, and she is on Carolyn's tax return as a dependent. She found out from the daughter that she lost her Social Security card, but she didn't tell her mom. So there's an example where someone got a hold of a Social Security number and used that to file a fraudulent tax return. Felicia received a notice from the IRS stating that she filed taxes in 2013 and that she had an outstanding balance of $331. However, in 2013, she was only 15 years old and she didn't have a job. She said she went to the IRS website and printed out a copy of her transcripts just so she could see what happened. So this is one of the resources we're going to tell you about in a minute, where you can go to the IRS and they can be helpful to you. So she got a transcript to see exactly what the fraudster had been doing. She saw that her mother somehow got her employer to issue 2 separate checks, one with her name on it, so she didn't have to pay extra taxes, And Felicia was able to get her mom to admit to this and told her that she needed to confront the IRS herself and to plead guilty that she was at fault. If not, Felicia would have been forced to file a police report. So this is another example of back to our warning signs around tax ID theft. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's your own family or friends who are at the root cause of this kind of fraud. And the last example that is a real-world one is Alejandro. Someone had been using his Social Security number for at least 3 years. He had had back surgery and he couldn't get disability because someone was working using his name. He received a notice from the IRS for unpaid taxes, and he was also alerted about multiple credit cards that he didn't open. So he was taking all the necessary steps to clear his identity by showing that his Social Security number had indeed been misappropriated by someone else. So what do you do if tax ID theft happens to you? And that's where Lisa's going to tell us more.
Thanks. So if you're a victim of tax identity theft, we encourage people to go to identitytheft.gov. It's the government's one-stop resource for identity theft victims, and it allows you to report identity theft and then gives you a personal recovery plan that walks you through all the steps to take. Now, the ITRC has some great resources too, and the FTC refers some of our hardest cases to ITRC, so we're grateful to them for that. But we do encourage you as a first step to go to identitytheft.gov because many people can handle identity theft on their own with the help of identitytheft.gov. Now, what you'll see when you go to that site is what you see here on the screen. And you'll see that you can get the whole identitytheft.gov website in Spanish as well if you click on that light blue box in the upper right-hand corner. Now, for tax ID theft, you can actually use this site to report online to the IRS through identitytheft.gov. I'll walk you through how that would happen. Here, you would click on Get Started, and then on the next slide, you'll see what you would see, which gives you some options about why are you coming to identitytheft.gov. Do you want to report identity theft? Do you want to report tax identity theft? Were you involved in a data breach, or do you just want to know more about identity theft? So here we would click on that second one, that someone else filed a tax return using my information in order to report tax identity theft. And then it'll walk you through about 5 pages that ask for information about the identity theft. And then on the next page, you'll see that you will get a Form 14039, which is the IRS's identity theft affidavit. Now, our system will pre-fill this form for you, and you can send it online to the IRS. That is the only way you can file online with the IRS is through identitytheft.gov. You'll also get an FTC identity theft report, which you can use to send to creditors and to credit bureaus in order to straighten out any credit-related issues. So really, this identitytheft.gov makes the process easier for consumers. And now I'll turn it back to James about some other ways to reduce your risk of tax identity theft.
Yeah, so the best thing, Lisa, is just not have it happen in the first place. So there are things that everyone can do to reduce your risk of being the victim of tax identity theft. So, it's the who, when, and how is, make sure you know your tax preparer, because you're giving them all of the most precious financial information you have. So make sure you have a trusted provider there. When, file early, but don't file often. Just file early, because that way you can beat the crooks who are trying to get to your tax refund if you have one, or their fraudulent tax refund. They're trying to get that in as early as well. So file early and beat them. How, if you're mailing, don't put tax returns in outgoing mail, take them directly to the post office. If you're filing electronically, make sure you're using a secure network. Don't use an open network at the coffee shop or the airport or the mall or wherever you may be. Make sure it's a secure network. And store your electronic returns securely and your paper returns securely, and shred any draft. So let's use that shred part here to go through some additional things that you should be doing that are just good general identity hygiene tips. We use that term around here at the ITRC, identity hygiene. So what does that mean? So the S is strengthen passwords and privacy settings. Use at least 8 characters, because the longer your password is, the harder it is for the bad guys to try to penetrate that password. Longer is better. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be just a common phrase. It can be a movie quote. It can be a book quote. Just make sure it has some length to it and characters, and it's something that's easy for you to remember. H is handle PII. That's personal identifiable information. Handle PII with care. Make sure you don't give out PII unless you absolutely have to, and make sure you know who you're giving it to and how they're going to use it. R, read credit reports annually. Make sure you go to annualcreditreport.com for a free credit report that is available to you under the law. You get it without cost. Make sure you're checking on that. And you can find out good tips on that from the FTC as well on how to use that information. E is empty your purse or your wallet. Don't carry more information than is necessary, and never, ever carry your Social Security card with you. And finally, D, discuss these tips with friends. Share what you know with your family and those folks around you, because if this is a crime that has a ripple effect. So it's not going to affect just you. It's going to affect people around you. So make sure that you are doing everything you can to protect yourself and the folks around you. Lisa, you got some more information for folks.
Sure. A couple other ways to protect your identity are fraud alerts and credit freezes, and this slide goes over the difference between the two. Basically, a fraud alert is something that flags your credit file, so lenders have to verify your identity before they grant you new credit. So usually that'll mean they'll call you to say, is that really you there trying to take out this new account? A credit freeze, on the other hand, is something that freezes your credit to everyone, including you, and can only be lifted to access your credit using a PIN or password. Both of these are free nationwide, and I should note, though, that these tools don't help prevent tax identity theft. They're more related to credit-related identity theft, but if you're a victim of tax identity theft, then that usually means that your Social Security number has been exposed and someone is misusing it. And with that information, they could also misuse it for credit-related identity theft and to open new accounts. So these are some good steps to take if you are a tax ID theft victim to try to protect yourself from other types of ID theft. Now, on the next slide, you'll see some contact information for the credit bureaus. These are the contacts you can use to place a fraud alert or credit freeze. For a fraud alert, you only have to contact one of the three, and they're required by law to contact the other two. For a credit freeze, you will have to do it individually with each of the three credit bureaus each time you freeze it and each time you lift the freeze. But those are the contact information for either one of those. And then on the last slide here, we have some questions, and I'll let Jim head off the resource list.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, should remind everyone here that the ITRC offers free victim assistance through our toll-free call center and our live chat function. If you find that yourself has been a victim of an identity crime, including tax identity theft, or you suspect it is, so you can contact us at idtheftcenter.org. We have a toll-free number, 888-400-5530. We do have live chat if that's more convenient for you. Our website, you can visit us there. We have a contact email you can send questions to, itrc@idtheftcenter.org. And we have our own mobile app that you can download from the various smartphone app stores that will also help you. It's our ID Theft Help app. So heaven forbid, if you are the victim of an identity crime, it helps you organize your response, track what you've done, so you can be very methodical in helping to clear your own name in these cases. And the FTC also has great resources for you as well.
Yeah, so for the FTC, if you've experienced a scam, we encourage you to report it at ftc.gov/complaint or 877-FTC-HELP. And if you've experienced identity theft, then you should report it at identitytheft.gov, or you can call 877-ID-THEFT. So before we close, I just want to thank James and the whole team at ITRC. It's really a pleasure working with all of you, and I want to thank you for hosting this webinar for Tax Identity Theft Awareness Week.
Well, thank you, Lisa. We certainly appreciate our partnership with the Federal Trade Commission. And all of you who joined us today, we certainly appreciate you. And remember that the FTC and the ITRC are here to help you all year long, not just during Tax ID Theft Awareness Week. We're here all year long to help you if you find yourself with questions, or heaven forbid, if you actually need to take advantage of the resources. So thank everyone for listening, and have a great day.